Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. So I've been asked quite a few times about my worm bin and how I go about worm composting and if I actually do it or not. So in today's video what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you around my worm bin. I'm going to show you the method that I've used to set it up, how it can be scaled up or scaled down to suit your purposes, and a lazy way of worm composting without going through quite some of the technical things that quite a lot of worm composters do. Now this is my worm bin, okay? It's an IBC tote. It's pretty big. What I've done is I've cut the IBC in half and I've taken the top part, the part with the hole in, and I've put that on top of the old part with the tap on. Now what that allows me to do is it allows me to use the top half as a massive container for all my composting materials, and then any juice that goes through I can catch in the bottom part, and it's a storage tank essentially for my worm, for all the juices that come through, and I can collect all the worm tea as and when I need to. So one of the easiest ways of setting up a worm bin is by using storage boxes. So you can just take a couple of storage boxes, drill holes through the bottom of one, and then place that on top of the other, and then you've got the lid with the storage box that you can contain everything in, and you've got the holes in the bottom that can allow all the juices to drain out. And that's essentially what I've done here. I've drilled loads of holes through the bottom, and what that does is it allows the worm juice or any excess water to just drain through. Now the reason that I've gone for such a large worm bin is it's really forgiving. It just allows me to make loads and loads of mistakes. I don't have to be as precise with the materials. That's one of the things that you'll find with a small worm bin. Because you want to have healthy worms, you're going to have to make sure that balance is right, the moisture is right, the pH is right, the mix of materials is right. Whereas with this one, I can just dump in anything that I want and it just produces tons and tons of really good compost. And that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm sifting off all of this compost and putting back the stuff that hasn't broken down back into the worm bin. And I use it on a system where I'd normally pile up the old stuff on one side and the new stuff on one side and just allow it to flow through. So allow the worms to flow through as and when they want to. So if it gets too wet on one side, they've got somewhere to escape to. If it gets too acidic on one side, they've got somewhere to escape to. They can just move about the bin. And I can compost a lot of stuff in this thing that a lot of people in traditional worm bins will tell you not to compost. And if you have a look around, I've got onions and all sorts of stuff in here. There's even some citrus in here. So most of my kitchen scraps come into here to be broken down and turned into compost. And right now what I'm doing is I'm sifting. So I gather a lot of the materials up to the top, and that allows the worms to go down to the bottom. And then I just take the top layer and I sift that off. And it gives me a chance to catch a lot of the unbroken down stuff and send that back down into the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just carry on sifting all this compost off and collect myself a nice good amount of compost, because this is going to be the fuel for this year's garden. So vermicompost is quite different to your normal compost. It's essentially worm poo, so it's worm manure, and it adds another dimension to your garden and to the nutrient content in your garden and availability. It's absolutely fantastic stuff. It's like rocket fuel. Now if I do end up with worms in my sifted pile, it's not the end of the world. I'll pick them back up, throw them into the bin, and if they do end up in this wheelbarrow and they end up in my plant pots, that's fine. Because they're just adding another worms in my compost and in my soil and everywhere else. Because of the way I garden with a lot of deep mulch and a lot of unbroken down matter, they're just going to carry on working in the rest of the garden for me. They're going to be absolutely fine wherever they end up. And I tend to harvest compost from here probably 4 or 5 times a year. I'll keep piling stuff into the bin, and every few months I'll come along and just have a look at what's broken down, what hasn't broken down, and if it looks quite good, if it looks like it's broken down quite a bit, then I'll go for a little harvest. I mean, I haven't touched this since the start of winter. Harvesting worm castings can take quite a while, especially the way I'm doing it, because my pile's quite wet, so it doesn't sift very easily. A lot of people, what they'll do is they'll wait for the castings to completely break down, and that's not me, to be honest with you. as you know, with all my composting styles, I don't go for completely, absolutely finished compost. I mean, this is pretty good in terms of castings, but there's still a few unbroken down bits in here. It does take time, because when I'm putting in my hands, I'm not trying to scoop up everything from the same spot, because I've just taken a scoop from there and you can see those worms starting to make their way down. Now I'm going to take a little bit from here, from the very surface, and hopefully I'll get a lot less worms, because some of them will move down. And then if any worms end up in my harvested pile, they get picked out and chucked back in, and the worms that are in here, they get chucked in. Look, this is what I mean about this kind of pile. You just throw in whole onions and it's completely fine. If I catch some young baby worms like that, I can pick them out and give them a flick and they're back into their home. So we've got a wheelbarrow load of worm castings already. And right here next to it, I've got my bag where I'm collecting all my worm castings. So there's already a wheelbarrow load harvested. It's time to get all this harvested now. So over it goes. You will lose some worms. So if you do come across worms as you're doing it, you could pick them out. And I've got a bucket of kitchen scraps next to me, so I'll just dump them in there. See that yellow circle just above my fingernail? So that's a worm egg, and that'll turn into a nice baby worm, so I'll pick that out. I wouldn't normally try and pick out as many worm eggs, because they'll just go into my pots and my soil and just populate that with worms. The more worms you've got in your soil, obviously the healthier it is, because you just want a nice environment for all these guys to do their magic. And what I'm expecting is loads of worm stuff sunk to the bottom, so take all the ones from the top, they'll all be conjugating to the bottom as the light hits them. Look at that. I mean, if you had a small bin, then this kind of loss of worms would be something to worry about. But because I'm using quite a large bin, and I know I'll have tons and tons of worms left in the bin, they'll just repopulate themselves in no time at all. It is ideally you wouldn't do this. You'd be a lot more careful if you're trying to run a commercial operation, or you were trying to not lose any worms, so you won't lose that time, because it will take a couple of weeks for the worms to re-establish themselves. You can see all these little white worms in this worm bin. Now, these white worms, these are called pot worms, and they're a sign that the compost pile is a little bit too wet and a little bit too acidic. But even then, you can see there's loads of pot worms, but my red wrigglers, and that's what this bin is predominantly populated with. You can see that they're doing absolutely fine in this bin. They're populating themselves, they're building the population back up. I've got a good mix of young worms and older worms. So that's what I'm happy about. That's what I want to be seeing when I'm messing with this worm bin. I want to be able to see that there's a good spectrum of life from different age ranges. So that's it. Whatever I miss, that's it. It's just going to go in there, and that's going to be my maturation pile. This is a step that a lot of commercial composters do use. I'm calling it my maturation pile, but this is just really my storage pile. I don't need the compost right now, so that's why I'm just storing it in these bags, and they can mature in there. If I needed it today and I needed to plant, I'd be using that straight away. I'd have absolutely no issue to use that. It's perfectly fine to use. That'll just break down really nicely, and it'll just continue to do its stuff in there. So I've still got a couple of wheelbarrow loads to harvest from here. I've just scraped it all up so it's a little bit looser for me when I'm sifting it, and I'm going to leave it for 10 minutes, let the worms settle a little bit and sink down. But while I'm doing that, here, look at this. See, I've got onions in here, I've got lemons, orange peels. In a bin like this, absolutely fine, not a problem, because there's a couple of reasons that people don't use citrus and they don't use onions in worm bins, and it's particularly a problem if it's indoors. So onions and citrus can really smell as they're breaking down, and you don't want that in your house if you're doing it that way. And anything that's a pile that's just too wet is just going to smell as well. So in a large pile like this that's outdoors, you can be quite lazy in the way that I do it. You can just dump in pretty much anything that you want. So I have a few different types of worms in here. Now these are predominantly red wrigglers, so they're very good composting worms. They stay near the surface of the soil and they eat whatever's at the surface level, and they tend to move horizontally. I've also got European night crawlers, and I've also got regular earthworms in here. For me, a multi-species bin is the way to go, but you need a large space to accommodate a multi-species bin. Something like this is perfect because you can have the red wrigglers feeding at the surface, the ENTs working a little bit lower, working all over the place, and you can have the earthworms that the regular earthworms that are burrowing deeper down, and they're eating what the red wrigglers and the ENTs are leaving behind, or eating their poo essentially. I mean, that's why I've gone for this larger method of composting. The work involved is at sifting stage is a bit of a problem. If you were just using a regular old small bin, when you're sifting that, you'd go a lot slower, just removing the top layers bit by bit, and then as the worms settle to the bottom like this, you just scrape off the worms at the very bottom and just take your castings from the top. I'm coming towards the bottom now, and you can see how packed it is with worms. Every time I just take a scoopful, it's just full of worms. But the thing is, there's loads of really good worm castings here. It's really well broken down, but there's just too many worms for me to sift the way I've been sifting and not lose all my worms. So all those castings there, I'm going to scoop up as much as I can into here. Look, see what I mean? There's just too many worms to try and sift through that. So loads and loads of lovely juicy worms. Look at that, absolutely wonderful. All these worms are out. Now I'm going to leave it like that and wait for all those worms to sink down. It'll probably take a couple of hours for them to all start conjugating right at the bottom, and I'll be able to harvest the stuff off the top. So now I've got all my rough compost here. This is not broken down at all, and this is going to be the bedding for the next round of composting. So when you set up a worm bin, this is the first layer. You're going to need a bedding layer. A lot of people use manure, some people use straw, and I just use my old unbroken down stuff. It's going to have a good balance of worms in there. It's going to have worm eggs, it's going to have food in there, and that's going to be perfect for them to just establish themselves. So that's not a bad harvest at all. Half a bag of worm castings, I think that's pretty good. If I was a little bit more careful, I could have probably got more from there, but I want to show you the way I'm setting up my worm bin again now. So I've got my bedding material in, and what I'm going to just do now, all my kitchen scraps, anytime we have kitchen scraps, that's just going to get piled on top. I'm not worried about smashing up eggshells. You can do if you want. And I'm not worrying about moisture content. I'm not worrying about any of that because that's all just draining through. It's a large bin. So we haven't cleaned the chicken house for a week. All this needs to get out. And this is going to be perfect for my compost pile. They'll just break down all this sawdust. They'll break down all the manure and they'll turn it into one nice lush compost that we can use to grow stuff in a few months. And the good thing about this is it's adding a level of dry material. But if you're setting up a worm bin with loads of kitchen scraps and loads of waste like this, the worms need something to bite into. And because worms don't have teeth the way we do and they can't chew their food, what they use is they use little bits of stone to grind everything up in the stomach. So what you want to do is add some grit into here, and the grit that we use is we'll stick a scoop of sand into here. So sand, and if you can't get sand, in a bin the size of this, a couple of scoopfuls of clay soil just sprinkled across the surface, spread about. That's enough for them to use and help them digest everything. Now, where'd you get your worms from? Now, one of the simplest ways of getting worms is, I'm going to show you. It's not difficult at all. And you'll get composting worms. You will get good composting worms. So take an ordinary plant pot just like this, right? You don't need anything special. Take a handful of material that you know worms are going to enjoy eating, yeah? So stuff that hasn't broken down, stuff that's yet to break down. There we go. Nice manure, nice bit of bedding. Really, really simple way of collecting worms. Find a patch of ground that gets quite a bit of water and has lots of mulch on it already. As soon as I start scraping this back, I can already see little worms here. Yeah, see, they're already there. Now that's just an earthworm. Okay, so there's a red wriggler, that's an earthworm. And it's quite near the surface. Now make a little hole. Just so you can bury that plant pot a little bit. You don't need it too far down, because remember, you're not trying to collect predominantly earthworms. Look, this is beautiful, isn't it? Earthworms everywhere. That's it. That soil that I've dug out, I'm gonna take that, because that's gonna be good food or good grit for my worms. And then I'm just going to pull the mulch around this bucket again. So I've always got bits of dirty cardboard lying around everywhere. Now I'm just going to cover that bucket up with that cardboard, and I'm going to leave it. Regardless of how many worms you've got and what type of worms you've got in your garden, do this method. In a week's time, that's going to have loads of worms in here. That's an absolutely free way of getting composting worms, so you don't need to worry about going around looking, searching for composting worms. You've got them right here, really simple. And that's just going to help your worms digest everything, nice and simple. So you should always add some grit, or you can use crushed up eggshells, you can use sand, cheapest option, garden soil, least effort as well. And there's a summary of my vermicomposting system and how I go about vermicomposting. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe for regular updates. If you'd like to support our channel, why not become a patron? And I'll see you on the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.